News like the song about
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show today. We have some crazy breaking news coming out today. We also have some updates on the shooting from last night at the correspondent dinner. Um, the guy was from California. Um, so we also have updates on that as well. You do not want to miss today's show. We have lots of information coming out of the Middle East. Seems like the Iran peace talks or ceasefire has completely collapsed. Um, we'll also get up to date on that as well. So stay tuned. If y'all new to the channel, go ahead and drop a like, drop a subscription. Or I'm sorry, subscribe or follow. Big boost to the channel. And also smash that bell button so you get notified when we get on air. But in further ado, let's get into the news. Um, it did not do that to me. Yeah, it did. All right. Oh well. Yes, it did. Okay. All right. Well, but anyways, all right. So, yeah, let's get into the news. One second, let me fix something real quick, y'all. I don't know why I didn't do that before I started. I should have.
24 hours of the news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of significant developments within the Middle East, Eastern Europe, East Asia, Western Europe, the United States of America, and also Western Africa as well over the course of this day. Significant news has emerged from the area of the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Middle East, as it does appear that the ceasefire has completely collapsed between Israel, Lebanon, and Hezbollah, as we have been able to see that armed firefights are now occurring within the southern area of the country, and we are also understanding that both sides are exchanging significant fire. In action that the Islamic Republic of Iran has prior stated would lead to the return of hostilities region-wide if that was to be the case. We also understand that there has been significant and continued U.S. military buildups throughout the area, including southern Israel, the entirety of the Middle East, and elsewhere, as it does appear that U.S. forces are still largely growing in the region for a possibility of resumed strikes. The Islamic Republic of Iran has seized a couple of additional commercial vessels within the Strait of Hormuz today, while the United States of America has also turned around a large number of vessels as well in its own blockade at the entrance of the Gulf of Oman. We've also been able to see that 3 Pegasus aerial tankers were present today somewhere within the area of the Gulf of Oman, particularly that of the KC-46 Pegasus, which were apparently conducting some refueling operations for an endless air op that is being conducted by U.S. aircraft on board the Tripoli, the Lincoln, the George H.W. Bush, and other air carrier aircraft and ships within the region. We have also been able to see that the USS Abraham Lincoln is still on station, and we have also not heard that the USS Gerald R. Ford has been relieved of its position after the arrival of the George H.W. Bush, showing that air power is in fact growing in volume in the area instead of remaining at a constant state. We have also seen that Somali pirates have seized another vessel today off the coast of Africa, showing that the Somali pirates have made a complete return back to form. We have also been able to see as well inside of Mali that the ongoing rebellion against the government is still seeing some significant progress and dealing significant damage to the Russian-aligned government inside of Mali at this moment. Today, rebel forces were able to force the Russian Federation out of their major base inside of Kidal, where the Russian African Corps was operating, and we also were able to see that significant actions involving several Russian helicopters were also seen near to the capital inside the southwestern area of the country, as several ground forces of the rebels were able to fire upon one of the Mi-8 or Mi-17 helicopters of the Russian Federation's mercenary groups and was able to take one down, also leading to the loss of all crew members of the mercenary unit that were on board that helicopter. Ukrainian armed forces also landed a significant attack on Sevastopol today with great success, seeing that around 4 vessels were directly hit and heavily damaged in the midst of the attacks. We also have seen that satellite photography has finally come out from Tawabs, showing us the absolute scope and depth of the destruction and damage that has been seen within the port, which appears to be showing that around 56% of fuel silos appear to have been destroyed in the prior Ukrainian attacks, which is one of the largest volumes of total destruction that has been seen from Ukrainian attacks prior. We have also been able to see, additionally, that the Russian Federation did come under attack once again at Yaroslavl, with the attacks appearing to be successful as well there, causing even further damage to the Russian Federation's critical refining and oil industries. The Ukrainian armed forces have also been able to inflict large losses onto the Russian Federation's armed forces on the front line today and stop any and all frontline advances by the Russian Federation's armed forces, and also ensuring that the Russians are still on the back foot and are still being pushed back within the area of the city of Liman. We have a significant amount of news tonight as well coming from the United Kingdom, as RAF Fairford, where US B-1 Lancers on the front line today bombers have been based and operating out of in support of Operation Epic Fury in the Middle East, appears to have exploded and caught on fire tonight. It is unknown whether or not the B-1 Lancers are still at that airbase at this time, or whether they have sustained any minor, significant, or total loss damage in the midst of this explosion and fire that has occurred at RAF Fairford. Still, the situation is quite strenuous and is requiring significant observation from the public. We have also been able to hear that stocks inside of United States oil reserves will be dwindling rapidly, with around half of all available oil reserves in the United States being knocked out within the next month. And we've also been able to hear some other significant developments from around the entirety of the world. But as many of you y'all can tell, we have an absolutely stacked plate of news tonight, and we are going to be making sure to get through all of this news, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. And of course, folks, we have an absolutely incredible thing that we're doing tonight. It is the Sunday Night Fundraiser. And tonight's Sunday Night Fundraiser is for none other than Razom for Ukraine, an absolutely incredible nonprofit that has been helping out in Ukraine significantly over the years and helping to save Ukrainian lives and families, and also make sure that the people of the world remember the Ukrainian armed forces, the Ukrainian nation, and their ongoing struggle against the Russian invasion. But with that in mind, it is time for us folks to move on and into all of the major news that we have gotten over the past 24 hours. And that is going to be moving us on directly into the Middle East for our largest stories of the day, as we have been seeing significant developments within this area, to say the least, that is showing us that war is still a very close certainty or reality, especially for the entirety of the region, as it has become obvious that war has returned back to the area of Israel and Lebanon over the course of this day. Many of y'all will have known that yesterday, the Hezbollah and Israeli forces already began to return fire on each other as a significant drone and rocket attack was conducted by Hezbollah forces and was immediately returned in kind by the Israelis by them launching a significant bombardment operation and airstrike campaign inside the entirety of Lebanon, especially including its southern areas south of the Litani River. We now understand that Israeli ground forces and Hezbollah ground force fighters are now engaging in significant battles throughout the entirety of the area. We have also been able to see a large amount of video and picture evidence showing that over the course of this day, with some video footage here actually showing us some Israeli defense forces who were loading wounded IDF soldiers onto medevac helicopters, nearly getting hit by some sort of a Hezbollah projectile, which exploded near to the helicopter, and then we saw that the helicopter immediately left, trying to leave the area as quickly as possible. And here's that clip right here. And we see the drone come in and explode amongst the group.
Well, that helicopter's getting the hell out of there quick.
Man,
Look at that. Also, by the way, that looked like a FPV drone, like we've seen from time to time. We'll see occasionally some footage come out of the Middle East of like a Ukrainian-style FPV attack drone. It looked like one of those coming in.
Man, honestly, it did look like an FPV drone, and we now see that the Israeli Black Hawk is now going as fast as it can out of the area after the failed attack, or we're not entirely sure if it failed or not. It did appear to land in the midst of a large group of IDF soldiers that were right outside the helicopter over here, so we're not entirely sure if there were any casualties or fatalities, but still showing us that the ground fighting has been significant over the course of this day. There's also been significant strikes on cities within this area, including Arnoun in southern Lebanon, which we saw in this clip here, showing that Israeli JDAMs were landing in the city below and making their mark. We have also been able to see as well that there were some significant strikes within southern Lebanon in these pictures in the area of Burj al-Qawaya and also Kfar Tibnid, following earlier evacuation warnings. The Israeli Air Force is conducting significant aerial bombardment campaigns currently inside of southern Lebanon, while the Israeli Defense Forces on the ground are still conducting combatant operations against Hezbollah forces, and Hezbollah forces are also returning fire, which appears to be showing us that as of right now, ground fighting has returned between the state of Israel and the Hezbollah forces inside of Lebanon, and the ceasefire that was negotiated by the United States of America and was lauded as a major success has already collapsed in a matter of days, not to the shock of any, as most everyone already knew that this wasn't going to be going absolutely anywhere. The Israelis are hell-bent on...
And also, that was the extension of the pre-existing ceasefire that was allegedly already in place. The U.S. tried to extend it for another 3 weeks, and the 3-week ceasefire is the one that's now been breached, right? That's the new one?
Yes, that's the one that's been breached.
Wow. So that also, by the way, that 3 weeks, that was longer than the original ceasefire. So that was already a lofty goal, but it didn't even last for what? It lasted less than 3 days from the looks of it.
It appears to have only lasted, for about 3 days, which is, just in case if any of y'all are doing the math, that is 10% of the ceasefire. Well, not 10% of the ceasefire. Well, actually, no, that's kind of a little bit around 15 to 14% or so of the ceasefire length. Instead of it being 21 days, it's only been about 3, and it's already collapsed at that point. So generally not a good running score that we have at the moment, but as everyone would know, this was expected. The Israelis are hell-bent on destroying any Iranian-aligned proxy forces that exist around the literal area of the State of Israel, and we also understand that Hezbollah is hell-bent on conducting attacks on the State of Israel to be able to try and further their objective of the eventual destruction of the State of Israel, and also the persecution of any of the peoples living within Israel that would claim to either be Jewish or Israeli civilians or citizens. So generally, we already know that the recipe never existed for the ceasefire to last any longer than a very short amount of time, because both sides are hell-bent on the other's destruction. So obviously, this was going to be returning back into an armed conflict any day, and it certainly did return back to an armed conflict as of today, without a doubt. We also were able to see that footage has been provided by Hezbollah showing that they're now starting to use FPV drones in far larger degrees and applications than has been seen prior, and they actually used one of these FPV drones to attack and strike a Merkava Mark IV, and I believe that actually there was no description of the exact variant of the Merkava Mark IV, but let me look at this again here really quickly. Well, it is definitely a Merkava Mark IV-M, because we can actually see the little pad right up here near to the front for the trophy system. It doesn't appear that the trophy system worked against the FPV drone, and we can also see right here in this little, almost like loudspeaker-looking sort of addition to the side of the turret, the actual trophy system projectile detector or sensor system, and it doesn't appear that either of them picked up the drone or shot it down, and it did make direct impact on the side of the turret, which we believe is a fairly weak part of the Merkava, which may have led to the damaging or loss of that Merkava, but we're not entirely sure. It does appear, however, that it's quite obvious that Hezbollah forces are beginning to use FPV drones, much in the style that has been used in the Ukraine war, to a far larger degree to be able to try and inflict more casualties on the more conventional styled and conventional doctrined Israeli defense forces, which are currently fighting on the ground. One thing that is incredibly important to remember about this situation right now is that the Islamic Republic of Iran considers a ceasefire to include themselves and all of their proxy forces throughout the entirety of the region. That includes all Iranian proxy forces in Iraq, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas inside of Gaza, and the Yemeni Houthis within western Yemen. U.S. and Israeli forces and none of our allied forces can fire upon any of those groups or engage in active combat with them without the Iranian government, according to what we've last heard, automatically assuming that the war is back on, and they would then continue their own direct hostile attacks against our allies in the region, Israel and U.S. forces, at a whim whenever they would deem that to be necessary. The fact that the ceasefire has collapsed inside of southern Lebanon, and we are seeing the return of active fighting between both sides, is giving us an idea that the general peace that has been seen in the region is most likely going to be a temporary illusion and won't be around for that much longer, as it does appear woefully obvious at this point that there is no way, at least in my opinion, that this ceasefire is going to be holding for that much longer. There will be some sort of action forced either by the Iranians with their own attack on our allies, or we are going to preemptively attack them due to the worsening economic situations pertaining to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. We also were able to hear in the midst of all this today that the President of the United States made an announcement that the Iranians were going to explode. And I have to say, internally, we don't really know what was exactly meant by that, but if I can go and grab y'all this statement here really quickly to make sure to read it all for y'all, word for word and bar for bar the best I can, because unfortunately it actually wasn't put down on the map for me to quote it verbatim. It does appear that the President of the United States was largely saying something along the lines to a news reporter today that the Islamic Republic of Iran was most likely going to economically explode within the next 3 days, and that at some point they would be forced to negotiate with the United States of America because they will not be able to handle the significant and overwhelming economic strain that is being levied against them by the ongoing U.S. blockade. However, there is a little bit of an issue with that analysis. Blockades are not that quick in being able to conduct irreparable economic damage to a country to where it happens just weeks after a blockade was put in place. Historically, blockades are a fairly long-term sort of an action that is meant to weaken and destroy an enemy force. To give you all a couple of examples of blockades that have been seen prior in the past, the United States of America in the U.S. Civil War conducted the Anaconda Plan, which was the concept of deploying the United States Navy to be able to create a naval blockade of the Confederate States of America and eventually squeeze them dry of any of the imports that their nation relied on, considering that the Confederacy was entirely reliant on industrial imports, and to eventually destroy them economically as a result. It took about the entirety of the next 3 years from 1862 to 1865 to see that that blockade was able to truly bring the Confederate States of America to its knees in terms of material supply, and the lack of that due to the blockade. In the First World War, the British home fleet was able to blockade the Imperial Germans in an attempt to be able to conduct a blockade significant enough to be able to drain the Imperial Germans economically. It took the entirety of 4 years throughout the entirety of the First World War for the British blockade to materially starve the Germans of any of the necessary goods that they had to have imported from overseas. Once again showing, in both instances, that blockades can take years to amalgamate any sort of a major effect on a national economy to lead them to collapse, and it certainly isn't within a framework of just a few weeks. It would have to be within the framework of several years. But before we move on into the rest of our analysis and news on this, we actually have breaking news that's coming out at this moment right now. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so we have some breaking news that just came out apparently 40 minutes ago. It looks like Iran has given the United States a brand new proposal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, according to some U.S. mainstream media outlets. And apparently, it's a proposal to reopen the strait in the war. And also, here's the catch. They want to postpone nuclear negotiations until a later stage in the talks. But in the meantime, though, they want to start sort of getting around the Strait of Hormuz blockade. So, Enforcer, there is a post I've reposted right here from World Source News right now on our Twitter page. There it is right there. You can see it says, as part of this deal right here, the ceasefire would be extended for a long period, or the parties would agree on a permanent end to the war. They said, according to the proposal, the nuclear negotiations would only start at a later stage after the strait was open and the blockade was lifted. The White House has allegedly received the proposal, but it's unclear whether the U.S. is willing to explore it. So hopefully the U.S. does not explore this, because it seems like a very cheap attempt by Iran to get the U.S. blockade out of the way. It seems like that's what they're trying to do with this. And the fact that they won't negotiate nuclear up front, that pretty much gives away their hand for the most part. So if this report is accurate, this is a non-starter as usual. And also the White House apparently hasn't commented on it yet. But Enforcer, what is your take?
This sounds like a pretty cheesy and pretty scummy sort of an attempt for the Iranians to be able to try and continue to exude control over the Hormuz and try and bind the United States to a ceasefire that doesn't benefit us and doesn't allow us to be able to address the top issues that we have with the Iranians, like their development.
But anyway, sorry, y'all. So what Iran is trying to do is they're trying to get the U.S. to negotiate with or blockade gone. They don't want the blockade there. Of course, they don't want the blockade there. They're losing $500 million. They're losing $500 million a day. All right, for out of trade with China, Russia, India, and so forth. We're not going to accept the peace deal or ceasefire deal that they're actually proposing. There's no way that we're going to. No way in heck. But anyways, let's get back to it real quick. And
Of nuclear weaponry. This sort of an agreement here appears to be quite obvious that they're stating, at least from what we can see here, as a part of that, the ceasefire would be extended for a long period, or the parties would agree on a permanent end to the war. So it doesn't really seem at this point right now that this is clearly going to be removing a lot of Iran's restrictions on who can pass through the Hormuz. And we might agree to this, and then the Iranians clarify, oh, what we meant by the strait being open is that it's open for people who were aligned with Iran, but not for Israel and the United States or anyone aligned with them. And they could continue to make that claim, while at the same time, we made an agreement with them to basically end the war with the Strait of Hormuz in that condition even afterwards. Apparently, the nuclear negotiations wouldn't be talked about at all, which also would make it fairly obvious that they're trying to make that a situation to talk about later, and the reason being in that is so that way they could hopefully develop a nuclear weapon before it's brought up again later, so that way then it's completely pointless and the U.S. can't do anything to them, because then they can hold a Middle Eastern country hostage by threatening to nuke them, and then that would make the United States largely be forced to back off.
Carly, go ahead and drop a follow or a like, depends on what platform you're on. I think you're on Twitch. Go ahead and drop a follow. Really appreciate it. Big boost to the channel. Drop a like and hit that notification bell. We are giving y'all the news, no BS, straight to the fact news.
Of the Iranians and not conduct any armed action, because we would have the fear that the Iranians might nuke one of our allies within the region and cause significant damage to them, and also significant damage even farther than we've done to our sphere of influence in the region. So I would say that this is
Also, by the way, I see some viewers noting this in the comments right now in the live chat. They're saying, notice when this was put out. This report has come out on Sunday evening, right before the markets open on Monday again. Not saying that it has any correlation, but I will admit, though, it seems like some news like this comes out from some source pretty much every single Sunday evening at some point. So it's either a really convenient timing or there's something more to it, one or the other. But it seems a bit strange to me that there's always a little bit of a hopeful statement that comes out around this time. Is remember, I'm not sure if the oil futures are open right now. I'm not sure if they've opened yet. I think they might be, possibly. I'm not sure, but you know, the week always starts off with some positive news, and then after that, it starts going sideways as the week progresses, and then by the time you get to the weekend, hell's breaking loose for the most part. So it's a little bit interesting.
This is not a serious consideration. Also, with that in mind, I didn't think about that. But with that in mind, this is one of those little, feel-good comments that comes out right before the market opens, so everyone can wake up tomorrow, and they can have that song, like that happy song, happy, 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 as they're trading. That's all this is, because there's no way that this is serious at all. I mean, like the U.S. would ever even seriously consider, talk about, or agree with this whatsoever. I would say not. And so I think that this is once again an attempt to mislead. But we've also been able to see that in the midst of us covering the current news right now, right when we went live with our intro, it appears that Southcom blew up another narco boat today, somewhere within the Caribbean. So, there you have it. We'll show that to y'all here really quickly, considering that we probably won't be showing that later on. So there's the boat. The U.S. is, of course, tracking it. And then the U.S. is going to hit it probably about the midpoint of the video, right about there with a hellfire. Boat goes up in flames. The people on board probably got wiped out. And also, if there was any contraband on board, that was probably also destroyed as well. It's a little interesting that they can do that with these narco boats, which are basically Iranian fast attack boats. But for some reason, we can't just start blowing those out of the water. A little interesting with that. But anyways, moving us on out of that whole deal in the Caribbean, we have also been able to see, moving us on out of the breaking news and back into the major developments that have been coming out of the Middle East today, that the United States president did state that the Iranians were going to implode internally because of the blockade. And moving us on into another one, in the Second World War, the Empire of Japan was also blockaded, largely by the United States of America and the Royal Navy, and we did see that it took several years for Japan to once again be completely materially defeated at that point in time. Every single time we've seen a blockade attempted, and not only that, to bring a modern example here, the Ukrainian armed forces have attempted to blockade the Russian Federation from exporting oil products by striking their oil loading ports, which they've been doing for about the entirety of a year. And so far, the Russians have not economically exploded within about 3 days or 3 weeks. So this sort of a timetable being put out by the president of the Iranians are going to implode economically within the next 3 days, to be entirely frank with you all before we even get to the poll, is such a fanciful notion that it is not historically bound to any reality. There's no way that a blockade can implode a nation economically in 3 days. Most supply chains are made to deal with disruptions that are longer than a couple of weeks. So the idea of the whole economy imploding before most supplies that they would import would run out seems a little bit outlandish to me. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so they're saying 3 days. In 3 days, they're saying that Iran will apparently start exploding from within, which is very interesting language to describe that situation, by the way. And they're saying that's going to happen due to the U.S. blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, because as you know, the U.S. has full control of the Strait of Hormuz. It's the U.S. that blockaded it, and Iran's at the mercy of the United States officials. That's the narrative. So what are your thoughts? 38% said, I think it's empty threats from the United States, while 28% said the U.S. intends to attack Iran militarily by that time, and 28% said also the U.S. thinks Iran will actually financially collapse by then. So I think what the U.S. meant by this statement right here, because of course the wording is very colorful, it's very vivid to describe an economic collapse, to say exploding from within. But if that's what they're referring to, it sounds to me like they're trying to say, in a lack of better words, that Iran's going to start basically begging the United States for a deal because their economy is going to start collapsing because they can't export oil. But here's the problem, though. Satellite footage came out today showing a whole bunch of ships loading up with Iranian oil at Karg Island, and they're about to head out with it. And we've also heard that while the U.S. blockade is generally blocking ships, it's not blocking them all, and some of them are still getting out. So I would say I don't think 3 days is nearly enough time to cause Iran to collapse. For a blockade like this to start really causing that effect on Iran, if the U.S. blockade is being 100% successful, and that's a big assumption, by the way, then it's going to take months, not merely just a week or two. So I'm going to say it's probably empty threats, but I would still say I'm expecting some type of U.S. military attack on Iran soon. I'm expecting that sometime in the near future because they can't just keep sitting back and letting Iran rearm itself, because the longer we wait, the more they're going to rearm, the more they're going to get ready to fight. And when they start fighting again, it's going to be a much worse situation for the Gulf states, the U.S. forces, and everybody if we keep stalling like this. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to agree with 38%. I think it's largely an empty threat. I don't believe that there will be any attacks within the next 3 days, because that will place the attacks dead in the middle of the week. And to be able to conduct successful attacks, which the United States always attacks at night, almost as a standard, they would have to attack sometime here locally in the United States around 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time, which means that the markets would be open to be able to react immediately to that situation as it started to happen live, which we would probably see that they'd react pretty badly, because generally investors generally freak out whenever any sort of warlike actions are made and start dumping stocks like they're trying to dump off, some unwanted kid or something like that. So generally, I would say that it's definitely not going to be happening within the next 3 days. And I would also have to say that the Iranian economy is certainly not going to be collapsing within the next 3 days either. Blockades take a much longer amount of time to inflict any economic damage than just 3 days. If we were working off of that kind of a concept, then the United States is already economically exploded, and there are millions of people in the breadlines right now in this country unemployed because the economy here in the United States has exploded or imploded because the blockade by the Iranians has been going on for about a month. And the reality of it is that hasn't happened. The economy is certainly not looking good. And if you look at some of the more important telltale information, like, for example, the rates of bankruptcies for farmers in the Midwest and the Western United States right now, which have seen a jump of 70% over just the past few weeks, then that would generally give you an understanding that the U.S. economy in a decent myriad of industrial sectors isn't really doing all too well. But still, we haven't economically imploded. That would be a humongous exaggeration to be able to make that claim. And the Iranians aren't going to be economically imploding within the next 3 days either. We would have to keep up this blockade for about another year or two to see the Iranians actually economically suffer because of the current blockade that we have in effect right now. And we're not going to be able to keep this blockade going, to just be straight up with y'all, for 2 years, while we're also economically boiling in hell over here, basically, to just watch the Iranians eventually suffer. And in the midst of it, we're suffering about as bad as they are at that point. Yeah. And nobody's really stood to gain anything. We've all stood to lose everything.
Yeah, I guess the U.S. officials really believe that these talks are going to lead somewhere. I think they must believe that because, we have enough forces in the region right now to start resuming attacks on Iran. Like, we don't have to have everything in 100% perfect condition to start attacking again. We're totally capable of doing that right now. But the U.S. keeps stalling, though, which suggests to me it's a little bit less than simply trying to move more assets into the region. It's more about waiting to see if Iran's going to cave, which to me, that seems like another big mistake. like to give the Iranians a breathing room right now, it's going to be a big problem because we know that China and Russia, they're supporting Iran through proxy means, and they're sending a whole bunch of munitions to Iran nonstop during this entire ceasefire. The U.S. even admitted that about 2 days ago in the media. So the longer they're waiting, the more munitions are getting in Iran, and Iran needs the breathing room. They actually needed it because, they're firing a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of drones, a whole bunch of ballistics, and they need these replenishments or otherwise they will be in trouble. So they're getting what they need now to start the war even bigger than ever. I don't know why the U.S. is waiting personally. Like to wait right now is a huge mistake.
It certainly does appear that it's a huge mistake, and I would have to be honest with y'all folks, we're seeing that happening in real time, because to get y'all a little bit of a bleak report that came out today from inside the United States of America, as far as the economics are concerned, we've been able to hear that bankruptcy rates amongst farmers in the United States has risen significantly nationwide by about a factor of 30 to 40% over the recent period of time, and we've also been able to hear that within the western part of the United States, within the Plains nations, well, the Plains states, sorry, not the Plains nations, the bankruptcy rate has risen by 70% within that specific region, which is showing that they're getting hit quite badly. I'm actually trying to see if I can get that right here, and here we are. So this is the report right here. The U.S. farm bankruptcies are up 46% year over year, and 70% in the U.S. Midwest.
Yikes, that's bad. I can assume that maybe that's because the fertilizer prices are going through the roof. Maybe that's horrifying. Actually, that's bad news.
Yeah, it's not good news at all. And we've also been able to hear in additional statements, which I unfortunately didn't retweet when I saw it today, but I was actually able to hear that according to some polling that had been done amongst the agricultural industry, 70% of farms are stating that they will not be able to afford the increased cost of fertilizers because they cannot buy with their current budget the amount of fertilizers they would need to be able to properly fertilize their fields and to be able to produce the necessary yields that they expect in their economic forecasts and also in their harvest forecast. So we are already understanding that as of this year, there will not be enough fertilizers to be able to properly fertilize and manage our fields within the United States of America. And due to that, the yields, the crop yields that is, are going to be decreased. Fertilizers are, most fertilizers here in the United States are nitrogen-based fertilizers, and a lot of that actually comes from the Middle East. Most fertilizers around the world actually come from the Middle East. We use a lot of fertilizers here in the United States and around the rest of the world to be able to try and increase the crop yields of our fields. By using nitrogen-based fertilizers, we're basically giving the plants humongous boost in their ability to grow over a certain period of time. It's basically like growth hormones for like chicken and cattle, and it allows for the crops to be able to grow at a faster speed, mature at a greater rate, and also be able to produce a very hearty yield, basically a 100% yield per crop. That means that the crop yields are usually wildly high, much higher than they would be naturally using nitrogen-based fertilizers, which there are some caveats to using those for the environment. But outside of that, we're now understanding that because of the rising price of fertilizer, a lot of farmers are stating that they just can't, even at the current price right now, afford enough fertilizers to be able to fertilize all of their fields. That means that we can already expect that crop yields will be lower, and as a result of that, more so food prices and grocery prices or anything that has to deal with crop-based food items will increase, which is not exactly an incredibly good scenario for us to be in. Food prices are already pretty decently high, as many of y'all can tell, and we're mostly going to be seeing that as a result of this crisis in the Middle East, crop prices and food prices are going to be rising a good bit higher, probably to match the price per barrel of oil and also the price per ton of fertilizer and its spike that we'll be seeing here in the United States. So it's looking pretty grim. Not only that, we've also been able to hear today that down inside of the Gulf, we've now been able to hear that according to HFI research, they put out an infographic today showing the oil storage inside the United States per the hundreds of thousands of barrels, or actually, sorry, in KBBLS, which unfortunately I wouldn't know what the hell a KBBLS is. Would you know what that is? Kibbles. Of course, it's kibbles.
I think that's something barrels, I think, but I don't know the acronym, sadly.
Let's see. Yeah, unfortunately,
you think they would put like an abbreviation or an asterisk at the bottom where they explain what that means. Usually they put those on charts.
Yeah, usually they do. But outside of that, we did get to see the 5-year average, which is this graph right here in the middle, that's kind of in this bluish color, and then we see the dark navy blue purplish color is 2024. The orange one is 2025, which we can see right there, and this yellow chart right here is actually 2026. Now what's interesting about this is that the forecast right now, which is what we're expecting the amount of oil to be left in the country by, say, the end of the next month, is all the way down there at this little yellow diamond that you can see right there on the graph. As y'all can tell, no matter the year, whether it be 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, none of them ever reach that low. And this is just going to be over 1 month of consumption, because as many of you all know, also Mike Southworth just said, KBBLS refers to thousands of barrels commonly used in the oil and gas industry as a measurement for volume. And a big thanks to you for clarifying that. But as you can see, the volume of oil that will be available nationwide in this country is going to plummet by about 100,000 barrels or 100,000 units over the next month, with us currently having only about 450,000 units of oil, according to this graph, inside of the country. And that means that we'll be depleting 25% of all of the stockpiled and stored oil in this country in 1 month, according to the current projections. This might even get worse than the projections are showing, or it might be a little bit better if the situation improves elsewhere around the world. But this is looking rather grim. This means that the United States will be running on fumes, most likely within the next 2.5 to 3 months, if the Strait of Hormuz isn't reopened, and everybody in the world's basically having to buy the only free oil that's left from the United States and the United States solely.
Yeah, that's quite horrifying right there. Also, while you were talking right there, I was scanning for more breaking news, and I just saw another concerning article right here that says the global food shortage is about to get really bad in just a couple more months because 30% of the fertilizer is being cut off due to the Strait of Hormuz being blockaded, and they're prioritizing oil over wheat and grain shipments for the things that can get out, or they're trying to ship them through other means. They're not prioritizing fertilizer, apparently. So from the looks of it, we had mentioned that a while back. We had said fertilizer was going to be a very, very big choke point for the global economy, and it appears to be, it is being a very big choke point. And I would assume that's probably a huge factor in the farm bankruptcies here in America. That's probably one of the main driving forces behind that, would be my guess. So I'll be curious to see. I would imagine we'll be hearing something from the U.S. government about trying to lessen the fertilizer costs in the coming week or two, most likely, because it's going to be probably making headlines.
Yeah, I wouldn't have to say it certainly is probably going to be making the headlines. And I see some people in the chat, as usual, trying to turn this somehow into a political thing. But let me cut through all the political crap for everyone from the right and left and tell you what this is going to be. Whether you're trying to say, haha, liberal love oil or fertilizer now, or Republican gets taught lesson. I don't really know why everyone's trying to poke each other in the eye right now, because I don't think all of y'all are realizing, the political people are, that all of y'all are going to be bearing the suffering and the burden of this, basically carrying the cross on your back for the crucifixion that comes to follow with the rising prices because of the lack of oil in this country for the domestic market, and also the lack of fertilizers to be able to keep the crops growing in our fields for us to be able to eat. Regardless whether you're from the right or the left right now, I think that y'all need to drop the whole let's shit on each other while the boat's sinking and we're both going to drown dog and pony show, and kind of realize that this is looking pretty bad at the moment for us right now, and everybody needs to kind of get on the same bus of trying to find an answer to the problem that isn't being fixed right now. Because, you could sit there and as a Republican, you can keep, complaining about the liberals, and as a liberal, you can keep complaining about the Republicans. But the reality of it is y'all are going to keep distracted on bitching and moaning about each other until y'all both starve to death because you don't have any money left to buy the extremely expensive food because all of your money went into buying gas. So maybe you'll need to stop that and start focusing on this a little bit more, and how to try and maybe bring about a solution or put some pressure on the government in a way that isn't partisan, but it's more so just looking to try and save yourself at this point, so that way it doesn't end up being an unmitigated disaster.
Hey, look, we got a poll going on right now, y'all. We do have a poll going on right now. Like I said, we need to stop all ships from Hormuz. Yes or no? Let me know what y'all think. If y'all on YouTube, you can vote there. If you're on Rumble, Kick, or Twitch, just drop a 1 or a 2, 1 for yes, 2 for no, in the comments, and then I'll get your opinions. that way, or drop a comment on what you think. Let me know.
Because y'all are too distracted trying to get one over on the other group. But outside of
Get this on the fertilizer, because I'm not very familiar with where the fertilizer comes from. The question I asked was this: where does the U.S. import most of its fertilizer from? And it looks like the U.S. is one of the world's top fertilizer importers. It relies on imports for roughly 25% of the total fertilizer use here in the United States. It imports nearly all of its potassium or potash, but significantly less nitrogen and phosphate. So it looks like most of the nitrogen-based fertilizers apparently come from Canada, Qatar, and they're saying Russia. But I'm not so sure about Russia anymore, but they're saying Qatar and Canada. Also, they're saying with phosphorus, apparently the U.S. has strong domestic production, but still relies pretty heavily on imports for phosphorus-based fertilizers as well. The one thing that apparently we do have a good bit from is apparently, let's see here, it's not saying exactly which one, but we're actually one of the biggest importers of fertilizer apparently in the world.
Yeah, we generally are. Like, that's one of the that's also why, getting in a trade war with Canada is incredibly concerning, because actually a lot of our fertilizer is imported from Canada as well. So, that's generally why, people never think about that kind of stuff. You don't want to get in trade wars with people and like tariff the hell out of everything, because, you might rely on that to be able to eat the next day. But outside of that, it's not really looking like a good situation. It's looking rather grim right now, from the fact that a large amount of farms are already declaring bankruptcy and a significant increase year to year. It's a 46% increase already nationwide, and this is only about a month and a half into the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. And also we're seeing that oil reserves inside of the country are going to be plummeting into non-existence within the next several months, probably within the next 3 months at this current rate of consumption that we're seeing.
All right, y'all. So, one sec. You seen where we have the Strait of Hormuz? Totally blocked. And where's that?
Together members of both parties with members of the press, and in a certain way it did, because the fact that they just unified, I saw a room that was just totally unified. It was in one way very beautiful, a very beautiful thing to see. A man charged a security checkpoint armed with multiple weapons, and he was taken down by some very brave members of Secret Service, and they acted very quickly and have just released, for purposes of transparency, clarity, I've ordered it to be put out. You probably have it by now, put out on Truth and put out on many of the platforms. A tape showing the violence of this thug that attacked our Constitution, and also showing...
Now, he ran. I've seen the security footage. He ran through security. Right here it is. He was obtained. I mean, I think the guy might have had a chance at the Heisman Trophy, the way he was running. Cole Allen was his name. I hope he's ready to get set down. I'm going to set him down for a while. But anyways, that's the show for tonight, y'all. Hope y'all liked it. Drop a like button, drop a subscribe button. If y'all watching this later on, I hope y'all like it.